Good morning, everyone. How are you? Good to see you all again. Well, we have another week of rather busy and concerning issues that we've been living through. Obviously, if you've been watching the weather, you know our friends up in Louisiana are going to get hammered again. So our thoughts are with them as they deal with that. If you have acquaintances out on the West Coast, you know they are getting burned again, and we are hoping that things work out better for them and keeping that positive energy going toward their experience. And if you're a citizen of the world, you know we are in one hot mess, pretty much everywhere. So today's topic, the evolution of a country, its people, and the spirit that binds them, could be multi-parted and go on forever, but I will try to be brief this morning. Please bear with me. Ken Wilber writes in A Theory of Everything, an integral vision for business, politics, science, and spirituality, a title as long as mine this morning, writes that evolution appears to be following an intelligent design. The anthropic principle implies that some sort of creative intelligence is behind cosmic evolution. Now, the anthropic principle, I had to look it up because I wasn't 100% sure what it was, states that sentient life, that's us, can only exist if the general principles and laws of physics that make up our universe contain the elements required for that life to evolve into existence. That's the simple version. Now, a logical extension, therefore, can be drawn to understanding that if we are the evolutionary result of cosmic dust simply evolving, we must be but a step along a still unfolding spiritual journey. We know from our study of spirituality here in the science of mind that spirit is a builder. It loves to create things. That's what it does. It just loves to build and build and build. Therefore, it goes without saying that it doesn't stop building. It's infinite. It just keeps building. So if we're simply a step along the way, we're not finished. We're still developing. Wilber writes again that human beings are born and begin their evolution through the great spiral of consciousness, moving from archaic to myth, to magic, to mythic, to rational, to perhaps integral, and from there perhaps into genuinely transpersonal domains. But for every person that moves into integral or higher, dozens are born into archaic. The spiral of existence is a great unending flow stretching from body to mind to soul to spirit, with millions upon millions constantly flowing through that great river from source to ocean. No society will ever simply be at an integral level because the flow is unceasing. Although the center of gravity of a culture can indeed drift upward, it has over history, as it has over history. See, Wilber is drawing here on the theory of spiral dynamics, which is another great study in and of itself, which is a description of our evolution from beings that are bent solely on survival to beings fully evolved into their spiritual selves, identifying behavioral landmarks along the way. In the United States, we grow up believing we are the vanguard of human evolution, that we are leading the way as an example for the world and all humanity. We have a constitution that says we get to form a more perfect union, which is often misinterpreted. It is to form a more perfect union, not to be a more perfect union. We don't start out perfect. We didn't start out perfect, and we're never going to be 100% perfect as long as human beings are running the show. But we are made more perfect with each step along the evolutionary path. The untold story is that each step often puts us into one hot mess after another. We started out as an agrarian society. We've evolved into an industrial society, and we've had all the growing pains that go along with that. Back in the day when the industrial shops first started working, there were no rules to protect the workers. There were no rules for safety. There were no rules for standards of production. And we grew by leaps and bounds, and as we evolved, we began to realize that workers were valuable and needed to be protected. We found out that the products we were creating needed to function properly and not blow up in our faces or fall apart as they raced down the railroad tracks at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour eventually. So rules developed. We evolved to a more thinking society that recognized that just having all the power wasn't the most important thing if we didn't use it properly. When we first started out as a country, voting was a privilege of white men who owned property. Over time, it evolved, and voting was extended to all white men, and eventually to all men, with the caveat that there were some men that weren't going to be encouraged to vote. And then eventually voting was extended to women, and then voting guaranteed to all men and all women. And we all know that that is only as good as we practice it. In the evolution of the common consciousness, there are inevitably those determined to retain the status quo. Those who prospered and lived comfortably because they had learned to game the system were never anxious to change the system. Today we see their efforts to suppress voter turnout, denying voting rights, spread misinformation, and stir up latent fears and suspicions to gin up the populace into supporting policies against their own best interest. Over time, all immigrants faced prejudice in their early waves. In their turns, the Irish, the Chinese, Italians, anyone from Eastern Europe, Africans, Mexicans, and of course there were always the original nations who were already here. All were suppressed. All were taken advantage of. All were thought to be less. One by one, each group was feared, hated, ignored, and eventually embraced. Well, to some degree. We certainly know that the Irish cops are very popular in certain parts of the country. The Italians are very proud of their heritage today. All the others have, in one way or another, been enfolded into our society in some degree or another. Of course, we still have our personal preferences, and some are being kicked around more than others. And at least as we embrace the nationalities, those who think they're superior could still hate people because of their religion or their sexuality. And happily, we live at a time where even that is starting to erode. Thank you, Spirit, for awakening our people to the reality that we are one. We are one spiritual being. These individualizations as identified by human beings are just that, human identifications. In spirit, there is no color, there is no religion, there is no nationality, there's just love. And a love that continues to build and unfold its truth as each of us is able to enjoy it. In the spiral development, each of us evolves from simply surviving, which we all go through when we're babies. You know, all we worry about when we're babies is where our next meal is coming from. And are we going to get some love today? As we grow older, we begin to realize there's other people in our world and that we need to interact with them. And we develop the tools, hopefully, to do that successfully. And then we start to learn to expand even beyond our little group and recognize that there are other people out there that we need to deal with and that we enjoy doing so. But why is it so slow to evolve? Why is the pace of evolution glacial? People fear the unknown. And that is a healthy instinct. Fear keeps us from doing stupid things. It keeps us from jumping off of a cliff into water that may be deep enough and maybe not. It's good to have a little fear in our life. But it also causes us to draw a small circle, to stand within it, to learn it thoroughly, and then defend it. We know that if we stay in that circle that we know so well, that we will remain safe. We will remain safe in that circle, and we will be the master of that circle. And we will also be its prisoner, because the fear is keeping us in that one spot, not allowing us to move forward, held prisoner by our own fears. Our spiritual evolution requires us to step out of our known circle and explore the strange and unfamiliar. Tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry because we are drawn to explore new horizons, experience new realities, and embrace different cultures. That's spirit within us saying, there's more out there. Get out of your chair and go explore it. Okay, we got to take a little break this year. We got a little thing going on called COVID. We're going to just sort of sit it out. But our hearts are begging to get out there. People are going stir crazy. We called it cabin fever when I lived up north and we were locked in for 9 months out of the year, because we need to get out and see something new. Spirit wants to build on our experiences. Spirit wants to bring more items into our process to think of and to develop and to see that there is more to life than what we already hold dear. People from all over the world immigrate to this country because their familiar holds no more fascination for them. Whatever was going on back in the old country simply wasn't working for them, and they were willing to risk everything, to come to a place they had no experience with. Perhaps had only heard a few stories, maybe read something in a newspaper, and say, that looks better than what I have now. That's what happens to us when we spiritually bottom out, when we have made personal choices that aren't working so well for us, when we have kind of gone down that road of self-indulgence and allowing our egos to drive us rather than recognizing and embracing our spirituality. We kind of get to a point where we bottom out and nothing's working for us. This is called the desperation move, and it's time to find something new. And we sacrifice everything. We gamble everything hoping that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and we make that jump to see what works out over there. So why is our spiritual evolution seemingly so glacial in its pace on the common consciousness level? Well, our egos fear being ridiculed, and accepting change requires that we admit we were wrong. Why would we change if everything was working? We wouldn't. If everything's working, we like to stay right the way we are. So we have to admit we're wrong, and then we have to go out and embrace the unknown. That's a double whammy. But surely the empowered are generous to share their power. Yes? No, I don't think so. The empowered are not giving a gift to the disenfranchised. They are recognizing that the energy required to suppress the nature of spirit, and they are relieving themselves of that burden. Look at what it takes for a minority to control the majority. The truth writes itself. It requires no energy whatsoever to reveal the truth. Simply see it, and there it is. It's already there. It's spirit. Lies must be invented. They must be sold. They must be maintained and defended. So much energy is expended, and it is still a lie. The lie requires an industrial scale infrastructure that draws resources from culturally advantageous pursuits, and it is still a lie. Spiritual truth requires no resources because it's already infinite, and through its nature is complete and whole. But in our human experience, our circle is finite. Our circle is the lie. Our world, as well as our country, is, as Wilbur illuminated, flowing through all the stages of evolution, existing at all levels at all times. Those existing in the earlier levels on the individual basis are often blind to the levels beyond their own, so they fight the hardest to retain what they have at the expense of the liberty to evolve. They simply cannot see that there's something beyond what they have, so they fear it, and they fight to hold on to what they have, fearing that if they let go, they're going into an unknown that might not be as good. Brene Brown writes in Daring Greatly that most people and most organizations can't stand the uncertainty and the risk of real innovation. Learning and creating are inherently vulnerable. There's never enough certainty. People want guarantees. When I traveled with my sister and parents across the country by car when we were kids, I enjoyed the art and skill of navigation. I liked to read the maps and see where we were and where we were going. I liked doing the calculations that told me exactly when we would arrive at a given point along our journey. Before I knew there was a science of mind teaching, I recognized that my life was not going to follow the rules society dictated for success. Along that journey, I evolved and grew fond of traveling to cities by air with a tent and a sleeping bag in my luggage. I would rent a car and hit the road not knowing how far I would drive or how long I would stay at the points along the way. My only limit was knowing that I needed to be at some particular destination at some particular time, but everything else was negotiable. I was evolving and accepting that uncertainty was okay. Spirit exists beyond the spiral, and draws us toward it, not to join it, but to recognize that we are already there. As a nation and as a people, the arc of our common consciousness is inevitably drawing toward our truth. And that is not a lie. Thank you.